Thanks for tuning into this special From the Stacks episode of Howe's Things, a podcast and radio show from the David A. Howe Public Library. Today is Batman Day 2021, and I'm joined by a special guest, Hilary, host of Previously on X-Men for the Radio Meanwhile Network. Hilary, welcome.
It's me. Hello.
Thanks for talking Batman with me today.
It's off my usual beat. But,
it is.
I'm happy to be here.
It is. I appreciate you moonlighting. So we're reading a comic that does have some X-Men connections because we're reading Batman Universe by Brian Michael Bendis.
Yes. He's done a lot of X-Men.
You're a pretty big Bendis fan, as I recall.
I am. You complain a lot about him being too wordy, but I enjoy the words.
Well, no, I enjoy the words too. I think a pretty fair criticism of him would be that the words tend to be those same words regardless of the characters. So like, if it suits the issue for Hawkman to talk like Veronica Mars, that's what's going to happen.
That's fair. That's fair.
And often that makes for a good time, but I think where it can get a little much, he did a long run on Avengers, and that was sort of like everybody was talking the same, and there was like 50 characters, and it just got to be a little...
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't read that one, so...
Let's pump the brakes a little bit. But Batman Universe has kind of an interesting history. So... DC started producing these Walmart exclusive stories, and they would be in a package.
Walmart exclusive.
Yes. They would put out these package comics called Batman Giant, and it would have one original story, and the rest would be repackages that kind of like went with it. So it'd be standalone issues from across the.
So DC went to Walmart corporate and was like, "Here, we've got a deal for you."
I mean, I don't know the steps involved, but that's essentially what happened. And this, as far as I know, and when I've read about this before, this was not something that worked particularly well. People didn't really know what they were. People weren't like going to that section of Walmart and like buying a random,
like people weren't going to Walmart and like buying a Buffalo Bills t-shirt and then like a cookbook by a Christian author.
Sure.
And then also a specialized Batman comic?
Right, exactly. Yes. And if they were to do that, I doubt that they would know that they have like rock star talent writing original Batman stories that you can only get in a Batman comic book from Walmart that's 90% old material.
This is blowing my mind.
I know.
That this is what happened.
I know. Well, it didn't last very long. 2018 to 2019 these went. So the stories, 6 issues of Batman Universe were spread across several issues of this Batman Giant that was Walmart only that no one ever read. And so in 2020 it was collected into its own trade, and people were just kind of like, what?
Where did this come from?
What is this? And it's also on DC Universe Infinite, which is the online comics app that DC Comics has, and that's where I discovered it. I was looking specifically for just a Batman story. I don't want to read like, issues 490 to like 495 in any given run. I just wanted a story that I could sit down and read by itself. And so I found Batman Universe, and here we are to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. Now, have you read Bendis X-Men stuff? Because I know that's your...
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I've read, he did All New X-Men, I've read, and he did House of M.
Oh, yeah, okay. I actually just read House of M. I'd never read it before. House of M is the big Marvel Universe-wide story where they're like, what are we going to do with the Scarlet Witch? Because she's too powerful and crazy things keep happening. And the thing that most people know about it is Scarlet Witch says, no more mutants. And
so this is
It's a huge deal.
This is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Brian Michael Bendis is involved in some real...
Oh, for sure. And I think,
world-bending issues.
One of your recent appearances on House Things, we were talking about WandaVision, which does pull some from the House of M storyline. So there's just some things in there. So yes, he did that, and he did All New X-Men, as you mentioned, which is the time travel-y one, where the 60s team comes back and teams up with the modern team. Crazy premise.
It's a pretty cool...
Works pretty well.
Yeah.
So Bendis has been a Marvel guy pretty consistently, and when it was coming time for him to write for DC, it was a huge deal. Like, comics would be like,
I was thinking
Bendis is coming. Like, it was a huge deal.
Yeah, when I started reading this before I saw who wrote it.
Yeah.
And sort of was like, wait a minute, when I was reading it. And saw it was him and was like, oh, I thought he was kind of a Marvel guy.
Yeah. Well, there was 2 pretty high level, I don't want to say defections, but 2 people that you really closely associate with Marvel have done DC work in the last 5-10 years or so. The other one being John Romita Jr., who's an artist, who's a legendary Marvel artist. And when he draws for DC, still to me, it's a little like, oh, that's weird.
Huh.
You know, like it's weird. But he did a lot of the New 52 Superman, which I ended up really getting into towards the end there. So, but anyway, those are some two high-level Marvel people that are over here. So Bendis was doing Superman. That was the big deal. He was going to do several Superman titles. I honestly did not know that this Batman thing existed, that he had written Batman. So let's jump in. Let's jump into the story a little bit.
All right.
First of all, I want to mention the art, which is by Nick Darrington and others. I think the art is really cool in this. It advances the story in really sort of profound ways. It kind of changes the story as you'd know it, like if it was a more traditional style, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's very striking. The thing that I noticed about the art while I was reading was that I was actually interested in the action scenes.
True. Yeah.
That had never, I mean, usually with action scenes, I'm just like gloss, look for a dialogue bubble.
Yeah.
But it's just like you could see exactly what was happening, which a lot of the time you can't. And you could see the progression from like moment to moment. It was really well structured.
Yeah. I like it because it sort of played to, you know, I'm a big fan of Silver Age comics, and this kind of played like if Silver Age comics had an actual good story. Like that's what this felt like to me. And I think the art lent itself to that. The kind of characters that were used and how we transitioned through them, I thought worked really well. But we start with Batman chasing the Riddler. And the Riddler is somehow involved in moving a Fabergé egg, which is a weird lens into
it starts because the Riddler has broken into a museum.
Yes.
And he stole the Fabergé
right
egg.
Yeah. And so we get a lot of art from the perspective. We're only seeing Batman's hands and like what he's doing while we have a conversation between Batman and Alfred over the comms. Just a great way to start it, I think. It's really, I don't think I've seen anything quite like that.
Yeah.
And the dialogue there is really clever between the two of them.
What you were saying about Brian Michael Bendis and how he writes the same for everybody is a legit criticism. But I think in this run, you see a completely different type of dialogue for all of the different people.
True.
Like I think this is
true.
a exception to that criticism.
I also think that he kind of finds a way to make it funny without it being precious. And I think that's hard to do when you're dealing with a character like Batman.
Yeah. It's really successfully maintains Batman's like power, mystique, his usual manner, while still having kind of this quippy thing going on. He even says cute quippy things here and there, but it just feels like consistent with a Batman type.
Yeah, it's almost like, did he mean that to be funny? You know, like that's how you respond to it.
Yeah, and it's like because of who he's talking to, he talks in this particular way, that kind of thing.
So something is clearly happening to the Riddler as we're catching up with him. Like the riddles aren't as clever and something is going on. So whatever's happening with this Fabergé egg has an element of menace and mystery to it.
Yeah, everybody's noticing that like the Riddler isn't up to his usual game. There seems to be something. And what I like looking back at this first issue is I remember thinking when it first started that everything was really confusing and weird, but like kind of looking forward to understanding what was happening. Like just like get into it, just let it go and it'll become clear. And now I know what was going on and it does make perfect sense, and it's just a fun thing to kind of look back.
No, it's true. As each issue progresses, again, 6 issues, we kind of have a different, it almost becomes a little mini Brave and the Bold kind of thing where we have Batman teaming up with a different character each time. First up, we have the Green Arrow.
Yep, Green Arrow shows up and kind of helps him with the Riddler.
But I like why Green Arrow shows up, because Green Arrow is pursuing the buyer of the Fabergé egg.
Right.
And Batman is pursuing the Riddler who stole it. So they're coming at it from different angles and then wind up together. And it's a good team up with Batman and Green Arrow. Again, good dialogue, good use of Green Arrow, I think.
Yeah.
You know, he feels very much Green Arrow, does trick arrows and things, you know, pretty much just what you'd want there. And then we transition into Gorilla City, right, is the next step.
Yeah, and that's a normal progression, right? He like this is like a scene cut, and he has traveled to...
He's traveled to Gorilla City.
Okay, that question will make sense later.
Okay, yeah. So we're in Gorilla City, and I'm not sure like what it is that gets him there, but he's trying to track the Riddler, and something about one of the clues makes him think that the Riddler is in Gorilla City.
He thinks the Riddler is being hidden there for some reason.
So he goes to the king of Gorilla City. I don't believe we ever actually see Grodd.
No, we never see Grodd.
Okay.
I thought he said that Grodd was in a different...
Yes, a different Gorilla City.
Yeah.
He did say that. So Batman finally kind of convinces the Gorilla City royalty.
The king of Gorilla City,
yes.
who is mad at him for some previous interaction.
Yes. And
Batman insists was Aquaman's fault.
Yes. No context. That's all we get. Oh, but you know what? I think maybe we have a little bit of a Jonah Hex teaser prior to this.
Before that?
Before this, yes. Batman rolls into a small town.
Oh, right.
Because he realizes that the original owner of this, or the reason it came to the museum, was because it had once belonged to Jonah Hex, and his granddaughter, Ginny Hex, donates it to this museum.
Yes.
Great scene here where Batman rolls into a small town.
Such a good scene.
And it's just people's reaction to it, her reaction to Batman. It's a really good...
It's so funny.
It's a great sequence.
There's so much in this, I think in the whole run, of people just reacting like people might react. Mm-hmm. Rather than in like the grandiose way that you would kind of see in most comics, but while still not undercutting the strength of the superhero characters.
One thing that I don't understand, and we can hold off until we get to the end, but in the scene with Ginny Hex, she opens up a case and there's a picture of Jonah Hex, and then like a light emanates and she sees something, and I don't think that's ever resolved.
It's not. I sort of wonder if it's not actually, if that's more of a style thing. Mm-hmm. Like, she's acting like she doesn't care about this past character.
But she does.
But she's just going and, like, she has this special box of her grandfather kind of thing.
All right. Anyway, back to Gorilla City. So they're like, well, hey, man, the Riddler's not here. You're the only human who's here. And so they look around and they just find the Riddler sitting on one of the thrones.
He's in the throne room.
Yeah.
Like the throne, I don't know, it sounded like it was a warehouse of thrones.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that is kind of how it feels.
And he's just hanging out in a throne. And he's spent this whole time, Riddler has spent this whole time sort of both kind of asking Batman for help and being like, stop following me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he's just sort of having a weird breakdown.
Yes. So Batman's trying to get some information from him. We have the egg in play again, and somehow something triggers the egg that Batman is going through this. And we have this panel repeated multiple times where you see sort of like a grainy, almost like a photo negative.
It's like the most of the panel is black, and then it has white, almost pencil lines.
Of an outline of whatever's happening.
Yeah, and it's like a few flashes of weird close-ups. It's very cool.
And Batman finds himself on a different planet. He's on Thanagar, surrounded by hawk people.
Now, this threw me for a second.
Okay.
Because I think it's the transition from being in one royal-seeming place, he's surrounded by a bunch of gorillas, and then in the next flash, he's in kind of a royal setting surrounded by Thanagarians.
Yeah.
And it made me feel like something had shifted in reality.
Oh, okay. I didn't think that, but
Which is not what happened.
No.
It just threw me for a second. But what actually happened is just that he actually has traveled only in space to Thanagar, not time, nothing. It really seemed like there was more going on there, but all he did was travel to Thanagar.
Mm-hmm. So here he's there, and they don't know why he's in the center of their court. They don't trust him, and so they put him sort of in interrogation mode where he's sitting there and they're asking him questions, and he's like, bro, I know Hawkman, can you just check with Hawkman? And they're like, why are you here? And they just sort of keep going at him.
Here's something that I like about this run as well, that keeps coming up with this, like, going to different places that he knows people. It's a much more relational Batman.
True.
Than you get kind of stereotypically.
True. Because
he's just like, we're like besties, man. He can vouch for me. Like, it's not even like, listen, I know this guy, he's my colleague. It's like, we're very close.
Yeah, he's like, I will text him right now. Hold on.
And it's like with all of the different Justice Leaguers.
And Green Lantern gets dropped here too, where they're like, what about the Green Lantern of your sector? And he's like, oh my gosh, yes. We're so close. So eventually they kind of drop the shields and everything, and they're like, okay, no, we believe you. And they're trying to figure out what's happening too. They try to help him along, and they don't really have much information to give him.
Yeah, and then this big disaster happens on Thanagar.
Right.
And at that exact moment, something that, like, the black and white flashes happen again and, like, suck him back to Earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we find ourselves with Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
And the Green Lanterns.
Mm-hmm.
So Hal and Green Lantern are there, and we were talking about Thanagar a little bit. And the transitions, I think, between each of these sequences is very good. You don't feel like, oh, okay, well, now it's the Green Lantern part. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, yeah,
like,
definitely. It feels very organic.
It's got a real nice momentum to it that you're just kind of like rolling into the next thing, and it's almost before you realize that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of good stuff with him and Green Lantern. They're still trying to piece together what's going on with this Fabergé egg. He tells him that it belonged to Jonah Hex, and Green Lantern's like, what? Like, why does Jonah Hex have a Fabergé egg? And long story short, they eventually find themselves in the 1800s facing none other than Jonah Hex himself.
Yeah.
And so here's what I thought. I thought that we were going to flash back to the granddaughter, and she was going to have a picture of Batman and Jonah Hex and be like, what?
Yeah,
but that didn't happen. I think it would have been cool. So Jonah Hex sees the masks and right away thinks they're bandits. So they take him off, and we get an outfit change for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jonah really has much context for what's going on. Like, I mean, he's aware of the egg, but I don't think he really,
Batman talks early in those scenes about, like, I don't know if you have the thing yet, but eventually you're going to have it, and you'd pass it down to your granddaughter.
Yeah.
So it's more like,
because they're not exactly sure where they are in the timeline.
Right.
As this is going on, alternately, we see what happens to the Riddler after Gorilla City, and he's explaining the situation. You don't see who it is, and you don't see who it is, and eventually it's revealed that it's Vandal Savage.
Vandal Savage was the buyer,
who's in pursuit of this Fabergé egg and has been for a lifetime because of whatever.
Because that's his thing.
Yeah. And this was kind of I was like, oh, darn it. I feel like too often you go to the well of Vandal Savage when you're like, we need an all-powerful villain who can do stuff. It's like, oh, Vandal Savage.
I think that I am tainted against Vandal Savage because of
Legends of Tomorrow. That is a fair and accurate assessment of how you'd feel.
Whenever I see him in the comics, I have that exact same reaction, but then it seems fine. Like, I read it and I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So I think it's possible that a lot of my bad feeling is just from that show.
That's well deserved, and they earned that. But I guess, I mean, the concept of Vandal Savage isn't bad. I mean, there's a lot of stories you can tell using that. And if you don't know, Vandal Savage is essentially an immortal character who has gone through...
That's sort of it, right? Like,
yes.
That's the only thing.
Yes.
He just doesn't die.
More or less, yes. And has amassed power over the lifetimes. But I just think he's overused. And I think he's particularly overused in a story like this.
Well, listen, I thought it was going to be Ra's al Ghul. Oh. So I was glad that it wasn't him.
Yeah. Okay.
Speaking of overused.
I'll give you that. But I honestly didn't mind it. You know, my initial reaction was like, blech. But I didn't mind it because it wasn't really a Vandal Savage story. He was just kind of a player in the greater story. So anyway, back to the Old West. They're trying to figure out, they don't know how to get out of here. They don't know why they're trapped here.
You have a very brief but interesting moment of Batman and Green Lantern being like, so we might just be stuck here forever. And like, that sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. A fun sequence where Green Lantern uses his ring to fly them across, and Jonah Hex can't stop puking.
Yep.
You know, which is a funny little thing there. So again, we have a little bit of a disaster happen, and Green Lantern is transported.
Yeah, and he's like, it's his ring is doing something. He doesn't understand why it's doing it, and then he just vanishes, and that's all we know for a while.
He's gone. Yep. And then not too long after that, a similar thing happens to Batman, but I can't remember exactly how.
Yeah, he's in some sort of danger.
Yeah.
And then gets kind of like yoinked out of it.
I think we have a Vandal Savage confrontation in the 1800s with Batman.
But I think it's the Vandal Savage of that
of
time.
the 1800s. Yeah, I think so. So because he doesn't realize what's going on yet.
Yeah.
And so that makes Batman wind up in Crime Alley, you know, where his parents were murdered.
Right.
Dressed as a cowboy with no power or anything, and finally he can reconnect to Alfred, and he's like, you know, send help quickly. And now Vandal Savage has caught up with him in the timeline, and he's like, I've been looking for you since you disappeared 150 years ago. Because again, Vandal Savage. What are you gonna And so he shoots him, but it doesn't seem to stick, I guess.
Well, he shoots him and he dies.
He dies.
I mean, it's a big
Yes,
thing, and he
yes.
like goes. Vandal Savage goes off and continues his quest or whatever. And we have a whole thing with Batman being like, "Well, I guess I'm dying. Really sucks that it's the same alley that my parents died in."
Right.
And then he just dies.
Yeah.
And then Alfred finally arrives and
Yeah.
and sees him be regenerated.
Yes. And it's fun because we've not seen Alfred this whole time, but they've had a ton of dialogue only through the comms, so Alfred is funny and fun. And he shows up just in a regular butler's outfit with the little domino mask on.
Mask.
Which is fun because that's what they used to do in the 60s series.
Yeah, I felt like I'd seen that
Yeah,
before.
when Alfred needed to like drive them somewhere, he'd wear a little mask. So I liked that nod. And so Alfred brings him home and is very snarky. You know, he's like, you know who might be able to look at your body that's been reanimated? The Justice League. And Batman's like, no, pass, I'm fine. And then here we're in a place in the story where there was a moment where people thought Batman was dead. So Nightwing has shown up in the Batcave. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, Batman's not missing. Batman's here. We're fine. And so they decide to have an old school team up.
Yeah, which I like, too, that Batman acknowledges. He's like, it'll be just like the old days.
Yeah, he's like, hey, the dynamic
duo.
Yeah. And Robin's like, only I'm wearing long pants. And Batman's like, all right, fine. Next, we go to a submarine, which I believe is Vandal Savage's submarine.
Yeah, I think it's Vandal Savage's submarine.
Yes.
He has a submarine.
So they get there. We have a big
If I
confrontation.
had endless time,
Yeah.
do you think that I could end up with a submarine?
Yes.
If
I do.
just all I need is endless time.
Yeah.
And ultimately I can find myself
Look,
a
I
submarine.
understand what you're saying, and I'm saying the answer is yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I appreciate your confidence in me.
So we're getting to the point now where we're just going to, you know, this is going to be the resolution to the story. So if you don't want to know how this ends, I guess maybe pause and go read the story and come back and listen
Yeah,
to it.
and do read it because I think
It
it's
is
a really
good.
time.
Thumbs up for me. I thought this was great. Batman has been sort of slowly figuring things out, and stuff with the way it worked with Green Lantern, the way it seems to be sort of a self-preservation thing, or it's preserving
the thing,
Batman.
There's like a pattern in the weird ways that things keep happening to him that he has started to attribute to the thing inside the Fabergé egg.
Yes. So Batman kind of takes a wild swing, and in a confrontation with Vandal Savage starts saying the Green Lantern oath.
Yeah.
And Nightwing and Vandal Savage are like, what?
I know.
What are you doing?
That's Vandal Savage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vandal Savage is like, are you having a stroke?
Yeah. Very funny. But not out of place.
Oh,
like,
it's so funny.
And so the egg opens and a white ring comes out, and Batman is suddenly like armored up as a White Lantern.
Yeah.
And so like nobody knows what's going on, but Batman doesn't have a lot of control of it, and he starts to pretty quickly realize like, wait, I'm trapped in this
Yeah,
thing.
I can't. This is
Like,
not under
this
my
is-
control.
So
I can't get out.
Nightwing goes to help him, and the suit reacts like it's a threat, and so Batman's like, stay away. And suddenly the Green Lantern Corps comes.
Like all of them.
Yeah, and he's like, whoa, 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 I can't control this, and if you attack me, you know.
And they think that he's done some crime against the
that
Lantern
he's somehow
Corps.
corrupted like the power and is doing something with it. So Batman, and I think it's a kind of preserving the host. Batman's consciousness is transported like into the ring,
Right.
and he's sort of trapped there. And then he sees a guardian, which we learn is a construct, a program, kind of explaining what's happening. And he's trying to explain, like, look, this programming is broken.
Yeah.
Like,
we need to shut down.
This is a problem. And so it eventually does. What happens is it kind of rejects Batman as a host.
Right.
It's like, you are the problem, and we don't want any of this. And it goes to Vandal Savage, and now this is bad. Then we have a hard cut, right?
Yeah, this was the one transition that I didn't feel like worked.
I agree. I felt like I missed a page.
Yeah. Because what happens next is, like, Vandal Savage gets the ring and is like, finally, all this power, tra-la-la. And he grabs Batman and is like, you made this last too long, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make the world think that there's never been a Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess that just happens.
Right.
Like, it seemed like there was more to
Yes.
that. But, like, the next thing you see... And it's not even like, this is a world without Batman. Or you don't see, you know... Bruce Wayne living his life never having been Batman.
Right.
It's just, you're just thrown in.
Yes.
And sort of learn over time that I guess this is that world that he was talking about without Batman.
Yes. Yeah, and so Bruce is on a mission that he's trying to get. Is he still trying to get the ring?
He's hired Deathstroke.
Yeah.
To get the Riddler.
Right.
Who does not seem to know who he is. Like, he's like, are you Bruce Wayne? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I guess that should be the first hint, but it was not clear.
No, it wasn't. And honestly, so we find Vandal Savage eventually.
Yeah, eventually he gets through the Riddler to find Vandal Savage.
Yes.
And then just like right away, Vandal Savage is like, well, I made the world not have Batman, and that didn't work, so here you are.
Well,
and made him Batman again.
What happens is Vandal Savage is trapped in the ring just as Batman was.
Right.
And so when Batman touches him or whatever, Batman is also in the white ring, and Vandal Savage is like, wait, are you real? Because I think the time for Vandal Savage has been elongated while he's trapped in the ring.
Okay.
So I think he's been in there for a very long time, and he sees Batman and is like, okay, well, maybe you're the key to doing this. And so, yes, he restores him as Batman.
Which to me felt like not long enough for there to be no Batman. I guess I just felt like that was something that came up in an early draft, and they should have just cut it.
Yeah.
But instead they tried to like cram it in.
Or have it not be Batman who goes to the ring. Have there not be a Batman and have somebody else, somebody we've seen already, go, and Vandal Savage is like, we need Batman.
I think the main thing is that we needed to settle into it being the world without Batman.
Yeah.
In a way that just didn't happen.
Well, yeah, it's one of those do it or don't kind of situations.
Exactly.
And
like I would do like an issue.
Yeah.
Without him.
Yeah.
Or nothing.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad to hear that you had the same reaction here, because I fully thought maybe I just skimmed a page that I shouldn't have or something, but it is just kind of a hard cut.
Yeah.
So the ring is, I mean, it kind of breaks and they're back where they are. They're back on the submarine with Nightwing and all that. And it's like all of this craziness that's happened was instantaneous, and they're kind of down for the count. And the Green Lanterns take the ring, and that's pretty much the conclusion.
Yeah. Once Batman's back, I feel like it's back. The story's back on track. The fact that it's as close to the end makes it feel pretty rushed, but I guess I feel like if they had just cut that one bit, then it would have been fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I don't think the ending itself is rushed, but I think it's the fact that they had the weird snippet and then it's the ending.
Yeah.
That made it feel rushed.
Well, I think they kind of painted themselves in the corner because they make a place where Vandal Savage pretty much has to relinquish the power. He has to relinquish it or lose it in some way, and
yeah,
I don't know. That you're right. That is the place where I'd maybe like knock a star off the review.
Yeah.
But we have a pretty satisfying conclusion nonetheless, and the last panel is Batman swooping through, putting the empty Fabergé egg back at the museum.
Yeah, and you get kind of just a fun, like, celebrating Batman kind of a moment, because, like, he puts the Fabergé egg back, and there's some, security guards
some banter with the security guards.
And they're just like, isn't it cool that Batman exists? And then there's, like, just a big splash page of him with, I don't know, swinging from, some sort of grandiose Batman pose, and it's just like, Batman, wee! And that's the end.
This is I mean, like you said, I think this is really good. I think people definitely should read this one.
They definitely. Well, you telling me that nobody has heard of it is very distressing to me, because I really, really like it.
Got to get out there.
Yeah,
you got to get out there and find it. It's got pretty high ratings on Goodreads and other things, so I think like as people discover it, it's getting pretty good reviews here. It's nice because, again, it is not really connected to any sort of continuity. It's just like if you are familiar with Batman at all, you could pick this up. You know what I mean? If you're
definitely.
like, okay, Batman, I know who Batman is. You could read this and you wouldn't have to be like, what comes next or what came before. It's very self-contained. I think the cleverness kind of widens the net of who would enjoy it, because it's just a fun read.
Well, listen, I don't usually like Batman stories.
Truth talk. Well, I'm so glad I had you on the Batman Day episode.
Well, I like Batman fine. I just don't particularly enjoy reading Batman stories.
Yes, all right.
And he feels a little overplayed to me.
Oh, sure. Well, to use an X-Men parallel, I mean, he's the Wolverine of the DC.
Yes, he is the Wolverine of DC. So, as far as popularity.
Yes.
So that, I think that the cleverness and stuff widened the net to me.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. Do you have, outside of this, a favorite Batman story that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I do. I really enjoyed Hush.
Ooh. Yes.
I don't think that It was a writing thing.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think the thing that made me like it was the writing.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was like a clever kind of a writing kind of thing, but it was just the story was engrossing.
I agree. I think Hush is sort of written as it has a beginning, middle, end. And like they tried to use that character again afterwards, and they tried to sort of be like, no, it continues.
I hate when they do that.
And everything kind of, I don't know, takes away from that. But amazing art in Hush, really good use of characters, a good use of the Batman Catwoman relationship, which is, I don't often enjoy that. And I thought that was really good there. So yeah, I think Hush is a really solid choice. And if you're looking for more Batman content, you could dive into the All the Book Show archives. We've got some great interviews with Batman authors like Steve Englehart, J.M. DeMatteis. Last year, I spoke to Shea Fontana, who just finished Batman Overdrive. Great standalone Batman graphic novel for the younger crowd. So plenty of things over at soundcloud.com/allthebooks or wherever you get your podcasts. Hilary, if people want to listen to you talk about X-Men, where do they find you?
Over on Previously on X-Men. That's my podcast that we talk about all the comics and the movies and everything about the X-Men.
Most recent episode?
Most recent episode was we did the movie. Well, you and I did the movie Dark Phoenix.
Dark Phoenix.
So we talked about that for a little bit.
That was a good time.
Yeah, it was a good time.
I enjoyed it. I feel like that was one of the things where having the discussion changed my perception of the movie.
Really?
As it often does.
Interesting.
So anyway, all right. Well, thanks again to my guest, Hilary Gunning, and we'll see you next time here on How's Things.
See ya.
Happy Batman Day!